Let's talk about mods and conflicts and what a conflict is. Now, if you think about it, right, for a conflict to exist, two mods have to edit the same thing in the game. So the point of contact a mod has with a game is its point of conflict. If you had an NPC to a room, the spot the NPC is stood on would be the point of conflict. The room would appear to be edited, but in reality, it's just the spot the NPC is stood on. If you add a sword to an NPC, then the NPC becomes a point of conflict. Any other mod that edits that same NPC would also conflict. If that NPC had a level list on it, like just to randomly assign it clothing and loot and stuff, and you edited the level list, then the NPC isn't edited, just the level list. So you can effectively edit lots of NPCs without touching any of them by editing one level list. That reduces the point of contact to just one small level list. Trouble is, a lot of mods edit level lists, so that might be a small edit. It's actually a huge conflict. If you were to sort of like add a sword to a merchant chest, then that merchant chest is the point of conflict. But if you add your own chest to the same room and give it ownership to the merchant, you haven't edited the merchant. You haven't edited the merchant's chest, but you have added to what he can sell. The room would appear to be edited, even though technically there's no edit in the room whatsoever, because the chest will be below the playable area. So you've avoided it. You could also add dialogue to an NPC without editing the NPCs. So you can make an NPC issue a command, sell you things, do anything you can do with dialogue without ever editing the NPC. So if you had an NPC in a shop and you wanted him to sell some special under-the-counter stuff, like, say, illegal items, right? You could add that in a quest and have it added to the NPC so he'd offer that dialogue to the player. No edit needed. You see? Now, if you get a city and you edit the city to overhaul it and make it look pretty, the whole city becomes a conflict zone. That's the footprint there. It's an entire city. It's a conflict. So you're talking a massive issue there. If you edited the world, world space of all the trees, then the whole world becomes an issue. This is why certain terrain mods and city mods prove to be very incompatible. Overhauls tend to edit level lists. They're the most edited thing in the game. So that's a massive conflict. This is one of the reasons why you should only use one overhaul at a time, because the others are going to be editing the same things. And by knowing this, by not mixing and matching your mods, by understanding the point of contact, with the world is the conflict, then you can think, well, that mod there changes the guards, that mod there changes the guards, so the chances are that guard over there named Bob is going to be edited by both mods. That's going to be a conflict. And instead of saying to yourself it's okay to have a couple of conflicts, think no, zero tolerance towards conflicts, unless those conflicts are designed to be conflicts. Like when I made my Return to Helgen mod, and I made a deliberate conflict between my mod and Matty's Knights of the Nine Armour. That was on purpose. So when you put Matty's Knights of the Nine Armour after my Return to Helgen, they would appear on my characters. His armour was never in my mod, but it looks like it was because the conflict was deliberate. So you see, there's a lot of different ways of doing these things. As a player, you need to identify the point of contact a mod has with the world and how big its footprint is. The bigger the footprint, the more chance of a conflict. Level lists might be small, but they have a big footprint. Dialogue added to players don't have any footprint at all. In a way, if you had a dialogue to an NPC, should I say, right, you could have it do anything through the dialogue and then not. For instance, you could say, says, can I have one of your swords, please? And the NPC would go, yes, certainly, and give you the sword without any editing. It wouldn't even need to have the sword on it. You could conjure it up and just add it to the player's inventory. So you'd never actually have to edit the player or edit the NPC. The NPC would never be given a sword, so it'd be safe as houses. It's a trick, you see. There are lots of different techniques done when you're making mods that allow you to do these things and just eliminate the footprint entirely or reduce it to such a small degree that it never becomes a problem. Now, if you're actually making mods for the first time and you're looking at the whole world, thinking, oh, I'd edit that, I'd edit that, I'd edit that, I'm making a house mod, understand the more you edit, the worse the conflict's going to be. But as a mod maker, you get to accept your risk, how much of a risk you want to take. For instance, if you want to place a house mod, do you place it in the middle of a solitude, which is a heavily used world? Or do you stick it somewhere in the country nobody's probably going to use? And if you did place it in the country, do you put it on flat land? Or do you flatten out the side of a hill that nobody's likely to use and stick it there? Like, I don't know if you noticed, but in Kavachi Aftermath, I put a necromancer guild on the side of a mountain. And I did some pretty hefty edits of the mountain. But because nobody ever edits mountains and puts stuff on, that was a nice, safe edit. Even though it was a massive edit, it never conflicted with anything. So I got away with it. But if I'd done the same thing and stuck it in the Imperial City, it would have been an entirely different ballgame. Also, there's another trick for you. You've got a door, right, that leads to, say, the Tiber Septim Hotel. And you wanted a necromancer guild in the Tiber Septim Hotel. You could put another door in front of it or just behind it that the NPCs can use. The NPC would then walk up to the Tiber Septim Hotel, use the door and teleport into the necromancer guild. You would walk up to the door, click on the door, and you'd go to the Tiber Septim Hotel. Because whilst the NPC could access the door through another door, you never could. Because as a player, you physically got to be able to touch it. So you get a trick where the two doors are right next to each other like that. The NPC can access the one behind or the one in front, but you can only access the one you can touch. So you can create a door leading to a different place that only NPCs can use. You could then go and put a different door somewhere else that allows you to get there. But that's a little trick as well. Level lists are the most interesting way of adding things to the game. They're also one of the biggest footprint. A level list is used by quite a lot of mods. But if you create your own level list and you add that to your own NPC, and you put your own NPC in the game, that NPC will draw from that level list and pick random equipment. So every time you see it, it would look different. That way, you've got one tiny little imprint, or conflict point, where the NPC touches the ground in the world. The rest of it wouldn't be a conflict whatsoever. Add dialogue to him, you can get him to do anything. Add anything to anybody. In fact, you could say, look, I want you to equip all Solitude guards, with this magic sword, right? And do it now, please. And then a script would just add that sword to every NPC, every guard in Solitude. That's not under conflict, right? That's done in game. You can't get a conflict from in game, things like that. So it would add it to a conflict. Anybody else that's edited the guards would still get their edits, in place. Like somebody changed the uniforms, that would still happen. But then you'd add your sword, and your sword would be available to the guards as well. No conflict. So there are tricks, but it's all about the size of the footprint the edit leaves. Ideally, you want to do it in such a way where it leaves no footprints at all. But usually, every single mod you've got will leave some kind of footprint in the game in order to get its content in the game and used. The trick is not to make it a really big footprint, like editing a city. And if you are going to edit a city, just edit one small part. It's like staking a claim. This corner is mine, don't touch it. Other people will touch it as well. You guarantee you've got no right really to claim it as your sole property, like some people have tried to do in the past. But the smaller the edit you make, the better it is. Because usually the squares you see in the world space, if you edit that, then that's the only square that gets edited. Right? Everything else can be edited. You could put a different building on each square and they wouldn't conflict with each other. So you can reduce the risks even in a city that way. Anyway, I hope you understand now that the point of contact with the game is the point of conflict. So, when you're installing your mods or making your mods, think about the point of contact for the mod you're about to install or the mod you're about to make, and think of ways, if you're the mod maker, of reducing that footprint. Right? That's the trick to becoming a master mod maker, is knowing how to reduce that footprint. And if you're the player, think about what mods work by adding things to the game with a tiny footprint, and aim to use just those mods, not the ones that edit everything. And if you must use ones that edit everything, just use one or two of them. See you in the next one.